I was born in a small East Texas town called Kilgore. I was an only child, so it was just me, my mom, and my dad. And when I was little, my daddy was my hero. I was such a daddy's girl. I thought he was better than Santa Claus. As I grew older, our relationship, kind of started to move apart. And I started to notice things like whenever we went places, he was usually drunk, and it would embarrass me. And he was an alcoholic. He also didn't like some of my friends, especially my friends who weren't white. And so not only was he an alcoholic, he was a racist. And then went off to college and didn't think too much about my dad. I was involved in school and extracurricular activities, and I met a nice young man, and we started to hang out a lot, and eventually we fell in love. And it was really intense because that young man was Michael, and obviously there were some underlying feelings that I had grown up with, underlying thoughts about this isn't good, this is bad, black people and white people can't be together, all because of what I'd been taught by my dad. I knew that God had brought us together, and in his eyes, that it was okay, that our love was okay. Everything was going smoothly, and then one afternoon I got a call. Mrs. Hatcher, this is so-and-so, the nurse from a hospital in South Carolina, and you're your dad's next of kin, and he's here in the hospital, and he's not doing very well, and so we need you to make decisions on whether or not they would keep him on life support or take him off. And I said, okay, I can't make this decision right now. Can I call you back tomorrow? And she was like, well, I guess. And so that evening, I had to deal with a lot of feelings, like 10 years of stuff that I had buried. And I had to come to the point where I could forgive my dad. And I did. And that was such a relief. And then the next day, I called back the hospital and I said, okay, can I speak to the nurse, whatever? And she goes, oh, well, would you like to speak with Mr. Bramblett? That's my dad. And I said, well, can he talk? And she said, well, he's doing much, much better. He's right here. And I said, you might want to ask him if he wants to talk to me. And she said, okay. And so he did. And we talked, and it was good, It was good. And I caught him up on 10 years. And so we started writing letters and talking on the phone and sent him pictures of all the kids. And then he decided that he wanted us to come visit him. But when he said, I want y'all to come out to South Carolina and visit me, and I'm going to send y'all some money for the trip. And I was like, oh, wow, because I knew my dad. And if there was money involved, he was serious about it. And so when he's sending us money, I was thinking, he really wants to see us. He wants to meet his grandchildren. He wants us to come visit. And I was like, okay, great. Well, yeah, let's go. So we packed up, and I thought, this is great. This is so amazing because I'm going to get to see my dad, and I'm going to get to repair our broken relationship. And that's all I could think about, how wonderful and amazing it was.
When he said he was going to send us $600 and she had talked about he didn't like someone who was black, I was thinking that we're getting ready to die. So I thought that was just signing our death certificate by him sending us money. So I was just pretty much saying bye to things and saying, Lord, thank you for my life. And I was just saying bye to everything. We went through Mississippi, over the Mississippi Bridge. And, Martin Luther King is my mentor. So I was just saying things, just thinking about the things that he did in the South, and I was pretty much happy, and I made peace with myself because I knew that this man was getting ready to probably take us all out when we got there. And we knew that I knew he was going to kill us because he said bring his ex-wife. So we stopped in Longview and picked her up and took her with us. So we headed to South Carolina. We got there in the morning time. We pulled up, and there was Confederate flags on a car, on the trucks. I mean, Confederate flags everywhere. And for a black man to see Confederate flags and knowing in my own heart that this man's getting ready to kill us, I was really shocked. And so we get there, pull up to the yard, and they're sitting on the porch and they're rocking, and we get out of the car. But you know something? Some peace came over me, that the Lord had really said that I'm getting ready to change your life through this. And so that relationship begun when I got out of the car. I hugged him, gave him a big hug. We sat on the porch for two weeks. We stayed in South Carolina and really built that relationship. And really we talked, and he just said something. He said, you know something, you're a little bit strange and different. And so, yeah, I am different. I have a dark tan. So I just think that the Lord really changed everything. So sitting on the porch with him, we're able to share Christ with him, and he even asked me to baptize him. When I was thinking about death, the Lord was thinking about saving a life. About a year later, we got another phone call, and he had passed away. And I didn't get the opportunity to baptize him, but they said that they found him in the restroom and that he had water all over him, so I believe that he tried to baptize himself. But you know something? I got the opportunity to do his funeral. The only black man in the house is me in the whole thing. So people say, who's doing the funeral? It's me. A person he had called me names and called me the N-word for almost 10 years. But now I'm doing his funeral. That's what the Lord can do to restore relationships. So it's amazing what God can do when you're willing to step out of your own comfort zone and truly follow what the Lord is doing when it's really difficult. So I just say that forgiveness is a great thing, but relationships restored is great.
Wow, what a great story. So we're so thankful for Michael and Melissa for being willing to share their story so that we can all be a part of it. Well, you know, when you go to a play or a musical or opera or something like that, you sit in these seats, and sometimes they have really long rows. I remember being in one of those one time where the rows it was 30 seats across, from one aisle to the other, and we were right in the middle. And so the seats were so close. I mean, your knees touch the person in front of you. So, everybody had to stand up. So I remember going in and, saying, excuse me, all the way at 15 down. Okay, so finally we got in our seats. Well, then I was thinking, wouldn't it be improper? Wouldn't it be rude if we decided, like, during the middle of the play to just get up and walk out? And then make everybody on the row stand up, and excuse me, all the way out? That'd be terrible, right? Well, get this. There's a place in the Bible where Jesus said that's exactly what you're supposed to do. Okay, that's weird, isn't it? All right, let's look in our bare notes, and we're going to look at this verse where Jesus said it's important to get up in the middle of something and walk out. Okay, here we go. Are you ready? Matthew 5, 23 and 24. If therefore you are offering your gift at the altar, and there remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there in front of the altar. First go, be reconciled to them, and then come and offer your gift. Jesus said, it's fine. In fact, it's the right thing to do to get up right in the middle of the worship service and just head out if there's a chance that you can go and build reconciliation with somebody, restore a relationship, get things back together. To attempt to reconcile a broken relationship, Jesus said, is higher than worship. Or it is worship. A public worship service, that's a big deal. That's a big deal in God's eyes. He's saying, but love and reconciliation is even higher than that. And it's worth it just to walk right out in the middle of things and go and seek to reconcile. So how do you do that? How do you fix broken relationships? And what's the process? And why is it important? That's what we're going to look at today. So let's just jump right in. Number one, fix broken relationships because it's a matter of the heart. It's a matter of the heart. Now, I want us to look at this verse. Now, these are the verses that precede what we just read. You have heard that it was said to the people long ago, he's talking about the 10 Commandments here, you shall not murder, and anyone who murders will be subject to judgment. But I tell you that anyone who is angry with a brother, okay, let's pause right there for a second. He says anyone who is angry. He's not really talking so much about the emotion of anger. He's talking about the moral choice of anger. In other words, we don't really have control over anger that just flares up in our mind, because if you look at neurological studies, anger actually precedes our thinking brain. So anger is what happens to us anytime we don't get what we want. And so anger just like pops up. Then our thinking brain can decide what to do with that anger. So when he says anger of the brother, he's talking about anger, the choice of anger that ultimately might lead to murder. And it says with a brother, he might even be referring to Cain and Abel here, because everybody knows that story. All of his hearers would know that story. He's saying, you remember that kind of anger that leads to murder? Well, he's saying for Cain, it was way back there. It wasn't just the murder. It was way before the murder when he started making the moral choice of anger. Okay, so anyone who's angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment. Again, anyone who says to a brother or sister, raka, is answerable to the court. Anyone who says, you fool, will be in danger of the fire of hell. Okay, maybe this happened to you. It happened to me when I was 10 or 12 years old. Like in the 6th grade, and all the little boys there are like learning how to say cuss words and stuff like that. Okay, I remember these little kids saying, like going through a whole litany of different cuss words and say, you can say all those, but not around your parents. But don't say the word fool, because if you say the word fool, you go straight to hell. I remember hearing that as a 6th grader. I was like, okay, it's in the Bible, Well, this is the verse they're talking about. Anyone who says you fool. Now, these two words, raka, that's an Aramaic word. So the Bible is written in Greek, but raka is one of those little Aramaisms that kind of sneaks in from time to time. And it means fool, or it means empty head, or it means moron. That's kind of the flair of it. There are lots of words that mean the same thing, right? The word fool in this is the word moros or moron. Okay, so that's where we get our English word moron. And it's just another word that's an insult to somebody. What Jesus is saying is, you've heard it was said you should not commit murder. And then he's saying, but it's before that. And even words can murder. Even words can destroy people on the inside. How are you going to use your anger? Are you going to use it for good? Or are you going to let that anger have murderous actions and intent toward other people? I just heard about this the other day, but we have our self-talk. We're talking to ourselves all the time, like, hey, how you doing? You know that? Okay, so we're all talking to ourselves all the time. You're talking to yourself right now, probably. Where do we get that from? Well, a lot of it comes from how our parents talk to us, or how important people talk to us. So that's why it's so important as parents to talk to little children in loving and meaningful ways, because that's going to turn into their own self-talk down the road. And all of us have a lot of self-talk we don't like, right? A lot of self-criticism and that sort of thing. And so, let's help the next generation not have to deal with some of the pain, that we've dealt with. But words can influence people forever. And that's what he's saying. He's saying these words that you say to your children, they're going to be 42 years old, and they're going to be repeating those words in their own brain years later, because that's just part of the developmental process of human beings. Words can murder too. Actions can murder. It all stems back to a moral choice of anger and hatred toward another person. It's a matter of the heart. Number 2. Fix broken relationships because of the centrality of love. The centrality of love. There's one metric for righteousness in God's kingdom, and that metric is love. That's what we're measured on, is love, Jesus says. In John 13, Jesus is talking to his disciples. This is actually the night before he was crucified. And so he's sharing this whole thing. It's called the Upper Room Discourse. He's sharing this whole deal with his disciples. John 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, all of that. That just took like an hour or two in Jesus' time. And John recorded all of it. But here he said something amazing. He said, by this everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another. He had just given them what we sometimes call the 11th commandment. Love others as I've loved you, that sacrificial love. But here he says, by this everyone will know that you are my disciples. Now what that means, to me, is that there's something in the hearts of unbelievers that recognize God when love happens. Now, I don't know how that works, but there's something in unbelievers that can recognize that God is present when love occurs. By this, all men will know you're my disciples if you have love for one another. Now, we live in this world where there's a lot of cynicism about religion. And it's getting cynicaler and cynicaler, right? And the one thing that will speak to a skeptical world is the power of love. Buildings and religious rituals, they can just be explained away as normal human things. But love for the poor, love for the unlovely, love for enemies, man, where did that come from? It's a glimpse to all people of God's true love. So, when there's a breakdown of love, Jesus is saying, when love gets broken down, it's okay to interrupt the worship service and just walk out and go fix it and then come back. Because of the centrality of love in Jesus' ministry. Let's look at number 3. Why do we fix broken relationships? Number 3, because of its effect on your relationship with God. Because of its effect on your relationship with God. This new command that Jesus gave, when he said, to love others as I've loved you, Jesus said. Now see, this was before he was crucified. So it wasn't until after that they realized what that meant. That when he said, love others as I've loved you, he meant love in sacrificial terms. That is, sacrifice yourself for other people. That's what love is like. When you give of yourself so that others may be restored, may have love in their hearts. Now, in 1 John 2, John, the apostle, who wrote John 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, all of that, he's writing about the same thing. He says, yet I'm writing to you a new command. Its truth is seen in him and in you, because the darkness is passing and the true light is already shining. And anyone who claims to be in the light but hates a brother or sister is still in the darkness. You see, he's saying to those people, you think your love for God is different from love for people, but they're inseparable. That love for God and love for people, it's just part of the same thing. You can't separate these. It's like a family system. You know what family systems are, right? It's like like your mom, dad, brothers, sisters, all that is like a mobile, that hangs from a string, and then there's one of these, 2 more strings. You yank on any part of it, and it messes with everybody, right? So that's a family system, because we're all kind of hooked together, and so we're affected by every other person. So imagine this, okay? Imagine you got 2 teenage boys, and you're going to take them on a camp out. And you're like, come on, boys, let's go have some family time, But these 2 boys hate each other, okay? They're like fighting all the time, and not just friendly fighting, like mean fighting. They hate each other, they're calling each other bad words all the time, and they're just constantly insulting one another. So you go on this camp out, and here's what's going on. They're just fighting all the time and being mean to each other, just saying the most gosh-awful things to one another. And so here you are on this family time, and it's just like a disaster. Are you going to say, hey, let's get around the campfire and hold hands and let's just sing some praise songs to God? Right? That's not going to work, is it? Because the hatred in that thing is just going to ruin that. I mean, you can't sing Kumbaya when you got all that stuff going on. And so that's why our relationship with God and our relationship with each other are inseparable. So he's saying, if you're worshiping and then you remember a broken relationship that needs repair, it's okay just to slip out, and go check it out, go work on it. Now, speaking of relationships, we began today this new series on relationships, and we're having groups to study what we're doing here. Now, sometimes we do studies where we have a video, and we on Sunday morning we have the message from the Bible, and then we see the video sometime during the week, and then discuss it. But this time, here's what we're doing. On Sunday morning, we're dealing with this passage from the Bible, and then during our groups, that's what we're going to do too. We're just going to deal with the passage in the Bible. And so Kyle has written out our study guides, and they're in your bulletin. And we're going to have these every week. And so this is a study guide that you're going to use in your groups to work through. And it's got some questions and some commentary and that sort of thing. And our hope is that we really gain a deep understanding of this, because Matthew 5, man, what a passage, what a chapter, Matthew 5, the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount. It's just loaded with information about relationships and about how to live and about the Christian life. And so we're just going to dive into it on Sunday, and we're going to dive into it during the week, and everybody's going to get one of these. And so I hope you'll make time to be a part of a group. Right after our service today, you have an opportunity to sign up for groups. You can always be a part of our Wednesday groups. We'll have at least 3 groups in here in the auditorium on Wednesday nights at 7 around tables. And we're just going to study through this. So how simple can it get? Just bring your Bible, and we're just going to go through verse by verse and try to understand this better. Now, number 4 is we fix broken relationships because of the urgency of the matter. Because of the urgency of the matter. It's urgent. I mean, who knows what might happen next? And so go for it. Fix it. Because we don't know what the future is going to hold. And so Jesus gives us an illustration to kind of describe what could go wrong, okay? So here he says, leave your gift there in the front of the altar. Go and be reconciled to them, and then come back and offer your gift. Settle matters quickly with your adversary who's taking you to court. Do it while you're still together on the way, or your adversary may hand you over to the judge, and he'll hand you over to the officer, and you may be thrown into prison. Truly, I tell you, you'll not get out till you've paid the last penny. He's just given an illustration. He's saying, you never know how important it might be to reconcile this relationship. He's just kind of giving an illustration of like everything could just go to pot if you're not careful. I mean, you could just wind up in jail the rest of your life if you don't go ahead and reconcile it. It's urgent. That's what he's trying to say is just get with it. It's urgent. Now, Paul said, don't let the sun go down in your anger. He's kind of saying the same thing. And he's also saying anger has the chance of eating you up from the inside. So don't be destroyed from the inside while you have a chance to make that different. Don't let these anger toxins just eat you up. Every relationship is different now, and there's no 1, 2, 3 formula, for exactly how to make this happen. But the main thing is that you operate with grace, that you operate with love. It's more important to build a relationship than it is to be right. The need to be right is eclipsed by this law of love that Jesus is giving us. And so let's look at some few practical ways that we can make this happen. So we're going to look at several key ideas, some steps to take. It's different for every person, but hopefully these would be some things that would help you. So the first thing is to take the initiative. You take the initiative. Don't wait for the other person to take the initiative. So you need to talk to the person. It's a whole lot easier to talk to everybody else about the situation than to talk about the person that the problem's with, right? That's called gossip, by the way. But you might say, well, I don't want to talk to the person because I don't like conflict. Well, exactly. Nobody likes conflict. Welcome to the human race. You're normal if you don't like conflict because nobody likes that. The only people who love conflict are crazy makers, and you don't want to be around them anyway. Okay. Now, Adam and Eve, remember they had a conflict with God, right? They had this issue with God. What'd they do? They hid. They hid. And people have been hiding ever since. And so that's just normal if you don't like conflict. I heard one guy say that he had been around all these really tough military guys. He'd been around these Navy SEALs and Army Rangers, these tough Marines. And he said, but the one thing they were most afraid of was their wife sitting down and say, honey, we need to talk. Okay, so first thing is you take the initiative. Another thing, take responsibility for my part. I need to take responsibility for my part. It starts with me. It's called humility. It's the willing to say, I realize that I was wrong. Did you know that 43% of divorces list incompatibility as the cause? I looked that up last night, so that's like the latest figure. 43% list incompatibility. Okay, now here's a quote from Rick Warren. You ready? Friends, incompatibility is a myth made up by divorce attorneys. Did you know that? I didn't know that. Okay. Incompatibility is a myth made up by divorce attorneys. You're never going to marry somebody just like you, so you're incompatible with everybody. Any two people can get along if they'll just stop being self-centered. Okay, so there's a quote. I'm just throwing it out there. You can do with it what you want. But here's a line that you can start with that nearly always works in trying to reconcile. I'm sorry, I was only thinking of myself. Okay, you can start with that, and that's almost guaranteed to at least give you an opening to be able to talk about the situation. Okay, here's another one. Listen and seek to understand. Listen and seek to understand. You see, the reason that we hurt people is because we are hurt ourselves. You know, the old saying, hurt people hurt people. And so every person has hurt, so start listening for the hurt. Every person, we all carry around these bags of hurt. And we don't even know what all of them are. You know, some of them are just invisible. They're socked away deep in our brain structure. We don't even know what they are. We're not necessarily tuned into that. But we carry this hurt around. So, in order to help rebuild relationships, try to listen for the hurt. Because if you can begin to understand the hurt that's in their heart, you can begin to understand them and how they became the way that they are today. Remember, it's more important to understand than it is to be understood. And if we could always live with that concept, my job is to try to understand, not to try to make them understand me. My job is to try to understand. If we can do that, well, we can go a long way. Okay, the next one. Fix the problem, not the blame. This is a biggie. Fix the problem, not the blame. Because here's the problem. Usually in relationships, everybody wants to find the blame, right? Like, who's to blame? How much are they to blame? Like, who's 30% to blame? Who's 40% to blame? Who's only 4% to blame? We're always trying to find the blame. And if you read the paper about any problem that comes up, they're always talking about who's to blame in this, because everybody wants to find the blame. Here's the deal. The reason we want to blame other people is so it gets us off the hook. I mean, blaming people is just a way to not take responsibility for anything. If we can blame people for everything that goes on in the world, it's not our problem. We don't have anything to do with this. And so what I'm saying here is just forget about blame. Just work on the problem. And that's how you can solve things, is just work on a solution for the problem, not working on assigning blame and who has what part of blame in every situation. Blaming is just a form of judging. And we're really not intended to be the judge of other people's motivations. We don't even know our own motivations half the time. How are we going to judge other people's motivations? It's a very common thing for people to judge other people's motivations. But guess what? You don't know what their motivations are. You don't even know your own motivations very well. And so let's just leave the judging and the blame. We'll let God take care of that. What we can do is just focus on the problem. Now, let me pause here for a moment and just say one thing. When you were talking about reconciliation, we're talking about that it takes two people to make this happen. And obviously, if the other person is not interested in this, then there's no way to go there. In fact, Jesus talked about that very situation. He said, if you go to a village, because Jesus was sending his disciples out to all the little villages of Galilee. And there were approximately 70 that were around Jesus' area. And so he would send them out to these villages, and he would say, if they don't accept the love of God that you're preaching, then your only answer is to wipe the dust off your feet and leave. And I remember thinking, well, that's kind of mean, isn't it? Just say, I'm done with you, I'm out of here. But what else can you do? What else can you do? Jesus, that's the answer to that, is just, if they're unwilling to receive God's love, then your job is to go somewhere else where God's love will be received. So that's one thing here, is it takes two. And if the other person's not willing, then obviously it's not going to work. The other thing is about abuse. Nobody needs to be living in an abusive situation. So the answer to abuse is not reconciliation. The answer to abuse is to escape. Your job is to leave abusive environments. Now let's look at this last one. Focus on reconciliation, not resolution. Focus on reconciliation, not resolution. Look, you cannot resolve every problem, but you can still have a relationship. That's why you need to focus on the reconciliation part, not on solving every problem that you've ever had. I mean, you think about it. Who can solve every problem that you've ever had with every person? Nobody, right? I mean, of all the happily married couples that I know, all of them have situations where they've just agreed to disagree, right? I mean, they've just agreed to say, you know what, let's just don't go there in our relationship. We'll deal with other stuff. See, they still have the relationship, but they don't have to agree on every single thing in life. Nobody can do that. The only person who could do that is somebody exactly like you, and there is no one exactly like you in this world, thankfully. Okay, one's enough. All right. Now, by the way, there's something wonderful about putting relationships back together. That's why Jesus said, blessed are the peacemakers. He was saying, congratulations if you're a peacemaker. That's awesome. He's saying, if you want to have the blessed life, you can have the life of being a peacemaker. Because in God's economy, there's just something special about being able to rebuild a relationship and to reconcile a relationship. There's something great about that. And there's not going to be any brownie points in heaven for people who go around destroying relationships, right? I mean, there's nothing good about just going around and making a disaster of every relationship you ever have. That's not God's plan. But when you can reconcile a relationship, there's something in your heart that says, you know, I did good. That was a good thing. And that's going to last forever. That's an eternity thing. And it's a part of what God's doing in the world. So let's just have a new rule around here. Here it is. That anytime you feel like you need to go and reconcile with somebody, it's okay just to get up right in the middle of the service and just walk out the door. You know, that's no problem. We'll just celebrate that. Because reconciling relationships is a part of God's plan for humanity. And if we can do that, we can live by the law of love. Let's pray and ask God to help us do that, okay? Our Father, we realize, Lord, that relationships are not easy, and every relationship has a host of problems. But you love it when we're willing to apply the laws of love to bring rebuilding of relationships, reconciliation of relationships, to bring grace to all the people around us. And so, Lord, today we ask, let us be the agents of your law of love in this world. In Jesus' name, amen.